Hey, what's up, everybody? Good evening. Welcome to AI in 2026 Planning, Trends, Risk Management. My name is Broadus Palmer, and I'm thrilled to be your host for what we're going to promise to be a crucial and timely discussion. So, in a world saturated with AI hype, our goal is to really cut through the noise, and we're moving beyond the buzzwords and more to a practical, real world conversation you're going to hear tonight. And to help us navigate this complex topics and landscape, I'm honored to be joined by three distinguished experts in the field. So first, we have Parker Johnston. Thank you so much for joining us, man. Give the folks an introduction of yourself for those who may not know you.
Perfect. Happy to be here as well. Parker Johnston, currently serving as an agentic field CTO at Insight, meaning I get to go in and day out into the field with our customers, clients, kind of have those conversations, much like we're going to talk about today. How do we kind of set the foundation for what it means to drive successful AI adoption and delivery, establish proper guardrails, and obviously, I think, lead with opportunities and outcomes first, more than technology. Prior to this, 15 years in the industry, serving as App&O specialist across different landscapes, hyperscalers, and just generally overall focused, I think, more recently on developer productivity and experience as well.
Man, that sounds awesome, man. Thank you so much for being here. It's a huge honor, seriously. Next, we have Joe Stevens. Joe, go ahead and introduce yourself for those who may have seen you for the first time tonight.
Hey, so some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm Joe Stevens. I am a cloud and AI migrations and adoption expert. Working for a partner that's not what Parker's on. But no, so I've been in the industry for 29 years. Been through evolutions of, probably the most meaningful impacts of modern compute and modern data center in the last 2 decades. Seen everything from virtualization to private cloud to hyperscaler, now to AI. So, part of my whole mission is to make sure that people don't make the same mistakes with AI that they did in the clouds. Good to meet everybody.
Awesome, man. Thank you for being here as always. We got the crew together. And last but not least, we got Clinton Davenport. Clinton, introduce yourself to people who may not know who you are.
What's going on, everybody? Clinton Davenport. I'm a digital value and investment strategist. I help organizations simply just translate technology and application decisions into measurable financial outcomes. A lot of times my work sits at the intersection of IT, product, finance, closely partnering with executives, trying to look at products and evaluate future state application stacks, including AI, modernization, I can't even talk this evening, modernization initiatives, and architectural decisions through the lens of capital efficiency, unit economics, and long-term business value. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like to me you helping people build their business when, you coming in and just helping build it over and over and over. So appreciate you being here as well, man. So y'all, over the next hour, we're just going to be exploring 5 key pillars of AI strategy. We got AI planning, we have industry trends, we have AI ethics, we have risk management, and we have the talent pipeline. So with that being said, we encourage everyone to engage. Drop your questions in the chat, and we'll be weaving in and out of your questions through the discussion. All right. So, gentlemen, you ready to get started?
Go.
All right. So let's start with the first question. Let's start with this start small philosophy. So in a field where it's easy to get lost in analysis paralysis, how do you advise organizations to determine that perfect right size first project and the one that can prove value quickly without the risk of over engineering?
Yeah, Clinton, I'll take that one first and try to answer it. My biggest philosophy coming through that start small aspect is a lot of organizations want to hit it right the first time, but they also want to go away for 6 months and try to build the proper thing. The rate of change in AI, I think, is a big one. Of 6 months from now is not going to be the same as today, let alone 90 days from now. So try to take a larger initiative that an organization thinks is the first thing they should be starting with, get everybody in a room, have a general conversation around what are we actively trying to build and how can we make it 60-day, 90-day chunks of deliverables where we can find to what success looks like, deliver that exact moment. And then to Clinton's point about being some of his skills he has there around cloud economy and just general ROI, what if after those 90 days, we don't need to continue to drive that application forward anymore? What if we've hit a center mass of opportunity where we can stop that one and pick up another? If we've promised to go through and deliver a much larger initiative, we're now beholden to that. And with AI ever changing, it's going to be a frustrating situation when you're going to the board and saying, hey, we're actually not going to deliver what we promised you at the start. We're going to do the smaller aspect of it, but we're going to go ahead and take all that funding you gave us as well and try to reallocate it somewhere else. So just being cost conscious is a big one there, at least for me, with starting small and trying to do the right thing first.
So question on that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Rob. You know, I got to interject.
No, this is good.
Do you see an issue with organizations like that? And let's say they have something where they can't deliver and they go back to the board. Do you see where it's a disconnect where the board don't truly understand how fast this thing is moving and it's literally looking at the, what's the word I'm looking for? Evaluation on giving more money to turn out these initiatives to be able to get a return on investment?
I think that conversation comes down to your properly structured KPIs up front from your organizational standpoint. Again, getting everybody in a room. Most people think, oh, the CFO or the CEO is the one stakeholder that we need in our business. There's actually way more folks than that. Maybe you're trying to build an AI initiative that's going to help HR. Well, now you have to get the HR representative, you have to get legal, you have to get compliance, you have to get architecture, the development team. They're all going to be looking for different things to be successful. So setting those standards and then going to the board and saying, hey, this didn't work out, or going to senior leadership and saying, hey, this didn't work out because we couldn't hit 2 of these key initiatives is vastly more beneficial than saying, oh, we just can't do the project. But also, as you go through it, I know people are kind of going through early on education and AI as well, is always don't be hesitant to educate. I think that's the big thing of, we couldn't do it because of this. It's not a no forever. It's just a no with the technology we have right now. And here's why. Let us educate those individuals so that they can be informed and understand why something is technically not feasible at the current moment.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that type of issue in the cloud days as well too. And you started looking at, you know, cultural changes and things like that from an adoption perspective. I think one of the things I see on a day-to-day basis when we're talking to customers or clients, one of the things they run into is the fact that you have, you know, those that are enthused to adopt AI and those that are afraid of it, right? And there could be a myriad of reasons. One is, oh, it's going to take my job. The other is, we just don't have the ability to execute with AI right now because our code's deprecated, stuff like that as well too. So Parker, my question to you on that is, how do you navigate those complexities whenever you run into an organization that's, you know, partially good with change, but the other part is very resistant to change?
Yeah, I think that goes, again, as with all things education and getting the proper people in the room. You can have the best, everyone always says AI starts with data, right? You could have the cleanest, most beautiful data, but if you don't have a culture, technology ecosystem, or just generalized AI care to get moving, it's also not going to work. Back to the early cloud days, you had people in organizations that were stonewalling the migration to something like AWS or Azure because they didn't want to lose their keys to the kingdom of the data center. And it's something similar here. You have folks that are saying, hey, I don't want to fully adopt AI because I know it might be more work that I have to now do on a day-to-day basis, because I can shift something to a automated code generation system as an example, and I'm now being asked to do more. Why am I going to adopt something that's asking more of my time? So kind of going in, understanding the true culture of an organization, and then working them through the give-get scenario. We're going to give you this great opportunity to go and learn. We're going to give you this great opportunity to have a better work-life balance, get back to doing the work you enjoy. But what we're asking you to give us in return is your trust and confidence that we're going to do the right thing for the organization.
So a little bit of things I want to kind of ask, or at least challenge around this, you know, is one of the things that we've really been trying to stick to, Joe and I, and brought us over the past couple of these sessions, has been talking about that starting small, but at some point you have to start building bigger. And, you know, one of the things, you know, maybe as I was sitting here listening, kind of dawned on me, it's kind of a conversation I continuously have, is a lot of people are like, we're starting to really see where AI is doing really great at building POCs and doing the viability of those testings. But one thing that you're going to have to do at some point is commit to the business around some bigger things. And, you know, establishing that good foundation is something that I think all 3 of us really have urged over our career. Broadus, you probably have done it even in your internal organization and stuff of this nature, because without that, it's just shaky, or it's just really always you're playing whack-a-mole of some kind of sort. And from that, can you talk a little bit, Parker, about what you've been seeing around the agent space and just kind of what you're starting to see with people putting frameworks around these things?
Yeah, I think the frameworks that I've seen out there is more of an organizational enterprise-wide set of frameworks right now. I think that's the big thing is you have the wild west of POCs, much like you called out. Like everyone's running it on a desktop or a laptop under someone's desk. We're going to go into this MCP server. We're going to hit this agent over there on Bill's computer in the corner. But trying to take that actually the other way and say, hey, we're going to put all these guardrails for observability and maintenance and monitoring around what's going on. We're not going to try to hamper your capabilities to move fast, break things, learn as you choose to go. But how do we build trust and compliance into systems where it's okay, maybe we have a sexual harassment situation with a response coming back. How do we stop that from happening? How do we stop profanity and give you the tools that are going to allow you to be much more secure and confident in taking something from a workflow that ends up in dev to a workflow that maybe ends up in QA onto prod, but just continuing enterprise hardening as you go, the framework of, all right, we're trusting it here. Let's continue to move that forward and continue to go from there. That way, an organization also doesn't have to worry about their image being tarnished. You see a lot of those stories in the news where it's like, oh, this thing did an image generation that probably wasn't the best idea because no one thought about it. So how do we build those pillars of security, maintenance, and monitoring so that we know what's going on as we choose to move forward is really the foundational start towards that enterprise hardening that we've seen out there quite a bit.
So as we talk about that, right, from any one of your perspectives, where do you see the most organizations lag the most? Is it the data? Is it the security or the cultural element that's missing?
Ooh, I'll take that one first and then I'll let you guys. Honestly, I'm going to go with culture on this one. I find that the weird, maybe it's not the weird one, because again, if we look at back how this has historically gone in the past around any kind of initiative, it's always like people want to do these things and they only want to do it kind of like 1 foot in the door kind of thing. They don't want to jump fully into it, or at least have a dedicated group to this. The most mature organizations that I'm seeing, in my personal opinion, are doing 3 major things. Okay. They have a technical team that is kind of taking a look at things and trying to test the waters. And that can be comprised of quite a few, like charter members or change agents, whatever you want to call them. And they don't have to come necessarily from technical roles. A lot of times what we're seeing in the AI space, because of how different minds think, that's something that we need to explore that to be outside. So it might be just some kind of center that allows for people to kind of come together, exchange ideas, see how they can push the envelope and do that in a safe place within the organization. And then the 2 other things is they have a steering committee of executives that go across multiple solution lines within the business. And the reason for this is because if you don't have this, then you're going to end up with maybe competing priorities of things. And when they need to shift priorities, that steering committee, so to speak, needs to kind of be able to communicate those things. And then the third is there really needs to be somebody dedicated to driving this as an innovation leader within the organization. It might be 1 or 2 people, but it is their job to drive that. And those are the organizations that I see that are just taking off when it comes to these things. And they have learning plans in place for all their teams, and they have constantly something going out as far as information that's being fed to the organization around these, and they're sharing agents out across everybody. And so it's kind of like, did you know that you could do this? Because half of the battle is just knowing just concepts and some of this stuff. But I'm curious to hear what you guys have as far as ideas and what y'all have seen.
Quick follow-up on that one, Clinton. I know I have opinions around it. I'm happy to hear other folks' opinions. Do you feel that steering committee's better driven top down, or is it more of a grass swell bottom up style, or is it a combination of both? Kind of what have you seen out there?
The combo. It has, like, the steering committee is really more of, they come in when there's a time when there's a problem that needs to be decided at a higher level. They need to really stay out of the way, allow innovation to be blossoming from that perspective. Now, does the organization need to put some kind of, from a top-down perspective of like, hey, this is something, here's how we're doing it, strategy out there? Because I think that's a miss by a lot of people. You got to put a strategy out there. You got to put something, even if it's something that is just simple as, this is what we're testing. If you have interest in it, this is how you engage in it. But we are investigating this, and here's why. And these are the things that we believe that will help echelon our organization into the future and not get too far behind. Because different organizations are going to make different kinds of investments into it.
That's one of my favorite sayings is not having a policy is a policy unto itself. Like you can say we as an organization don't have an AI policy. We don't know whether to block people's ChatGPT and says, what are we going to do about Copilot? What are we going to do about all these other things? Well, that's just telling teammates that you don't have a policy and you can go do whatever you want. So that's a much larger risk as an organization is go and scoop out the latte art from, wherever this is and lift and drop it back into ChatGPT. That's opening the door for the Wild West for teammates. That's your IP getting leaked. That's all of the information out there getting leaked. Taking a stance and actually saying, look, our policy might be extremely restrictive as we learn more is a much better approach than saying we don't have a policy while we work to figure one out. Take it, block those IP endpoints, block that capability, disallow things in a policy, do whatever is needed to prevent data leakage, ransomware situations, IP going out, data cleanliness as a whole, and then work with those teams that are finding those issues and saying, hey, let's take a step back. Let's open up some of these endpoints. Let's open up the capabilities in our policy to go and have something that's much more secure and safe for our teammates. I've seen it many a times where it's, we don't have a policy and everyone's running, you got a little silo of Slack running over here for a team. You have who knows what else going on that's not approved by anyone. Instead of just embracing the change, I think that's the one thing, Clinton, you also called out. It's kind of embracing it. At some point, you have to say, look, it's here to stay. I think that hype cycle alluded to it earlier of it's here to stay. It's a thing we all have to get behind and trying to find a way to support teammates, those that choose to adopt it, to be able to move forward freely and not really cower in a corner and just start taking photos of their desktop to drop it into ChatGPT from their cell phone. So,
I mean, people are going to find a way. That's all I'm going to say. One thing real quick, Joe, before you start chatting, because people will find a way to use it and stuff. So
yeah, I think when I look at it too, like you have to look at the industry alignment too. So when we look at verticals, right? Like you get to T-Megs or oil and gas, a lot of those companies, and I'll take a step back, Parker, just to kind of on what you said there, because you have a lot of companies that are very resistant to change, right? So I can name a handful of multiple, or it's more than a handful. Almost every power and light company that exists today has old systems from M&E or an M&A that have come across, and they don't know what to do with it. And the problem with that is you start running into folks or teams getting disenfranchised when the larger teams, more agile teams, more innovative teams are adopted, for example, cloud. That's what we saw in cloud days with some of these bigger customers like that were working in that space. AI is running into the same issue, right? You've got, people that are just very excited about it, organizations and teams that are really, adopting it quickly. And they're doing it almost like it's the wild, wild west. There's no guardrails in place, like you stated there. Then you have the other side that's just like, we don't want AI. We have, legacy systems that are running on VAX that's 35 years old. There's no possible way we can do anything with that anyways. I had a client that was a waste management company that straight up was like, we want to adopt AI. And I'm like, why? And it's like, because we were told we need to. After having the company with the CIO, it's like, okay, it doesn't make sense for us to have AI other than in our back office, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one of those areas where like you have to have the right people. So my opinion is it is blended. I agree with that. Like you need to have, but I do think when it rising tide raises all ships, so to speak. Whenever your users are really rising it, if a C-suite says, hey, let's adopt AI, and then they put a plan around that, sometimes it's not aligned with how the organization would use it, for example. So really, the organizations I'm seeing have success is the C-suites that are allowing their technologists to actually leverage it in ways that they can. And then it goes back to Parker's point. Then you have to start putting governance, things like that as well. I think the true answer is, we all hate this phrase, the COE. It's really an AI COE, right? That's what you got to have, but it's got to be a little bit.
You got to call it something else, Joe. I'm gonna go on the record for that.
So let's shift to a broader industry landscape, right? So this is a big one, and I want y'all opinion on this. So we're seeing AI agents perform increasingly complex tasks. So who do you believe is or should be legally responsible when one of those agents commit a human error or a fraud act?
This is one of my hot takes of 2026 is I'm just looking forward to the first lawsuit where someone tries to sue an AI agent. That's the one thing I just want to fully watch unfold in the news. It acts on behalf, does something incorrectly, and then before you know it, it's like, how are you going to bring that to market? And then really, who does fall liable for it? Is it the engineer? Is it the person who deployed it to prod? Is it the company? I think those are all things that I want to see play out just from pure speculative dark humor side of the world, but it will be interesting to see, I think, what happens from that one. I have no idea who would be held liable in it. There's going to be a pretty transformational aspect of it. I think it goes back to the same as an automobile. You have self-driving automobiles. It's still the driver that's typically at fault of a lot of those situations. So is it the operator of the agent? And then you go down another rabbit hole of, well, if it's an agent on, a website that someone goes in and starts chatting with, who's at fault for that? Because it's not the person who's having the comments. It's technically the end of the back end data systems. That's the one thing I'm very interested to see kind of unfold from a legal frontier side.
Gentlemen, any thoughts? Clinton,
I'm
gonna go against the grain here.
no, like
It's like a Tarantino flick coming in this, except for its tech, right? Reservoir Dogs are all going to kill each other at the end.
That's fine. It's more fun that way. So,
I mean, I'm just sitting here going. I was honestly digesting on what Parker was saying, because it's like I keep going down that rabbit hole of like, who do you blame? It's not. It's. I don't really. I can't say that. I'm trying to think about how to best phrase this, but it's like, at some point, somebody is going to have to be held accountable in some way, shape, or form. And let's talk about like the Pirate Bay or whatever. You talk about that kind of stuff. Is it really the website's fault because people are hosting files and sharing that stuff? Or is it the people that are actually participating? It's just a common repository where people can go search files. They're not necessarily hosting anything. And I bet you, Parker, that will be the litigation that will be talked about heavily around that when that happens, because it's like, can you hold the website culpable for hosting the agent? Well, I think it's similarly to, well, the agent has to still be prompted at some point, even though it might be autonomous. At some point, somebody had to initiate that. Is that who we're going to hold culpable at that point?
So I'm thinking out the box here, where I'm looking at the situation where we talk about pirating like cable streams, right? When Fire Sticks became hot, and these companies were selling cable services
stuff like
for $22 a month. It was a conversation around like, hey, if you take part in this and you actually purchase this package and you're streaming this cable, you can be arrested as well. But it really did come down to the person who was actually hosting everything and distributing this matter, right? So we could be looking at something like that, where I guess it's more complex, but I'm just likening it to the same type of scenario.
Right. I was thinking of it though, is from an enterprise perspective. Sorry, Clinton.
There you go.
So whenever you look at it from a business perspective, when you look at it from like an enterprise perspective, though, I think we're going to see litigation fall on the companies that charter this, right? Whether or not it's their users and how that's handled. It's similar to the old Sarbanes-Oxley stuff, right? Whenever you had, the Enron scandal that happened, the Enron CEO took the fall, but there's a lot of folks that helped him enable it. They got off scot-free, right? The problem with that is it comes back to when it comes to regulatory and it comes to the government and law enforcement, they're going to be looking at the organization that did it first. So I'm thinking, if it's an individual, that's a lot easier to prosecute or go after, right? But if it's a company that's hosting it, not even hosting, but chartering it, those are the ones that are going to be the ones that get hit the hardest. And that's where we have to look at guardrails to protect them. So
I want to go double down on that one really quick and maybe take this to like, I don't know, it's like the old Pimp My Ride. I heard you like fish, so we're going to put more fish and more fish. If an AI agent were to write an application or an agent, so let's say I use GitHub Copilot agent mode to write an agent that's going to go and act as something else, but there's really no person that kicked it off anywhere. You just kind of blindly.
But you had to kick off that agent though and GitHub Copilot.
Yeah, the old deploy and did you? I mean, the SDKs out there. There's a whole bunch of capabilities now where you have, and it's not just a GitHub. Like you have the same capabilities across Claude, all these different workflows and workspaces where you can have, it's kind of some inception happening where how do you point back to one owner?
But
It falls under who chartered it.
We're trying to solve the problem.
Like it's one of those problems. Like, how do you get back to one individual that started it when an agent started the code that started something else? Like, I could tell the
started that agent. Who created the agent?
But I could say go and do X, Y, and Z and pull the data from somewhere. What if the data changes but my agent was proper at the start, and now I'm in a situation where no one knows? I think this simple thing that I'm seeing with it, and now that I'm talking through it more, it goes back to the conversation we just had, guardrails. How do I track what's going on, and how do I track what's happening? I guess we're learning today that the only way to solve AI problems is to start with that foundation, talking it out loud there. But it's one of those where if I didn't have logs, it could easily come back to someone and say, hey, this person did it, but someone else changed my data, but my agent was acting according to spec or according to plan. Someone else manipulated something else on another side and had an issue, but I need to be able to log that and show it. So I guess it all kind of revolves back to logging and in the fit there.
Well, let me I'm going to add something real quick, Joe. And on this is that going back to that building that foundation piece, that's really instrumental that you said that, because from that perspective, one of the things that I don't think we talk a little bit maybe deep enough here is like when we say that, I just want everybody to hear this that's listening in, is that what we're really meaning by that is you're sometimes having to tell the agent you need to stay within this parameters or whatever it is, this LLM solution that you might be working with, because they are going to go down the least path of resistance in the way that those things work underneath with the technology. And so a lot of times you have to put those specs in, or you have to put those constraints in. And that's what we're talking about when building that foundation. But Joe, go for it. I just wanted to call that out because I think that's something a lot of people forget about. It's something that I overlook a lot of times. I'm just like, you got to put these parameters around and say, no. This is something I need you to be exact on. Don't go outside of these parameters.
100%. And when it comes down to, Parker, your point on that, who do they point the finger at? It goes back to the responsibility of that charter, that the guardrails, defining those, making sure you have, the safety net safeguards in place, falls under the company, the enterprise that's chartering that, because they're the ones who are going to be held accountable. That's all there is to it. Again, we're talking about from a business perspective. From a personal perspective, like I said, that's much easier to deal with. But to your point, it's the responsibility of the company to put emphasis on guardrails, logging, things like that as well too, to have that in place. And if they don't think it is, and they're going down the path of just doing whatever, the Wild West, so to speak, and then they do have a situation where we have this happen, regardless of whether or not they say, well, it's not my fault, it's my developer's fault, it's my AI engineer's fault, it's actually the company's fault. And that's where the C-suite's going to get in trouble. And, it gets deeper on that. We've seen it play out time and time again, from all the way from the scandals that happened in the early 2000s with the dot-com bubbles all the way through Enron, WorldCom. I was at WorldCom whenever that went down. That was fun, but it's the same situation. They're going to hold the C-suite accountable, right? So Bernie Evers got life in prison, and Scott Sullivan got a $1 million kicker and was out in 18 months. So, and he was the one who enabled the whole process, right? So that's what you got to look at. So if this is a signal to all the C-levels, if you ever happen across this, get consulting around that and get those guardrails in place, because that's where the big exposure is going to be at. And that exposure isn't little like it used to be. It's all at once. That's the problem.
How do we plan for that with new models coming out? Like, I'm gonna drop a bomb here. But OpenClaw. It was kind of yeah. I'm going there. We're talking about the evolving landscape. That's always good. I gotta press on the trigger button, man. Come on. I know in the security you're talking about these kinds of things, and it's just kind of like you're building this stuff out. You're having to worry about the risk. You have these solutions that are coming out every day, almost, it seems like, that are just taking us exponentially further down this road that none of us, I don't think anybody could have seen how far we've come in this short of time when we first started this. Maybe eventually, but not this quick.
I think ClaudeBot, the interesting thing that I did not run it. I did not install it by choice. I think the big thing that folks kind of had me start to understand going through that was much like the Facebook days, early Facebook days of people posting anything and everything on there. Yeah. You should probably start to question if things are secure or proper as you're starting to give it access to, let's see, your calendar, your emails, you're letting it act on your behalf. Kind of do that double take of like, is this too good to be true and something I should trust, maybe dig in a wee bit more? And I know that's easy for me to say as someone who's in this every day as a technologist. I can look and say, oh, there's the API keys for all of these things that have later been found.
Yeah.
The difficulty with it, and I feel like it's much of the same situation of like trying to teach maybe my grandma how to spot phishing attacks or, spam text messages. It's no different than that. Trying to take a friend and say, look, this is probably you being the product. Let's try to understand what this is choosing to do and take a step back. Even in the realm of AI, the old adage of like, if it's too good to be true, still probably reigns supreme. Something came out of nowhere in a weekend, took off. In 48 hours, it was deemed to be maybe not the best choice of things for us to be using. But people are still using it, having fun with it. That's totally fine. I think it's fun. Just know what you're getting into as well. Like, hey, this is going to potentially have access to a lot of things. It's on the internet. It's there forever. Let's make sure we're doing the best thing for our own personal security as well as organizational security before you just dive in. Every couple of years, you're going to have a situation like that. I guess the speed of AI every couple months, but it happens.
Fun over security. That's it. So
hey, we learned that in the cloud
sorry.
age. We learned that in the cloud age, and we're still making the same mistakes. That's the problem, right? So I wrote an article, Standing Still in the Age of Acceleration, right? It's the same situation. Like, we're still stuck in that mentality. Let's go do this. And we're not even starting to see the financial impacts just yet. They're coming. That's the issue, right? When we start thinking about tokenized utilization with things like Bedrock, and you have an organization that opens it up and doesn't limit the amount of tokens to be pushed toward an agentic AI deployment, the next thing you know, the guy throws 1 million tokens up. Why is our AWS bill now, $600,000 this month? Well, you have one developer causing it, right? Or even worse, what happens when one of them gets wise enough to figure out that they can get high GPU systems running in AWS, and they start spinning up their own Bitcoin miners, stuff like that, and they're using agentic to be able to push that kind of stuff. It's crazy, right?
At bad governance, and why are they not doing better metrics?
But it's not even metrics.
It's worse than shadow IT. It's everything.
But it's going back to the policies around all of it. I know you can set the policies, what you have access to, what you don't have access to. And again, back to my statement earlier, make it super restrictive. Come tell me why you need these GPUs. If you tell me you're going to Bitcoin mine, I might say, give me 10% and we'll just let it go. But it's one of those situations where trying to dig in and say, all right, let's talk through the reasons as to why. And again, maybe I don't know. Educate me on why we need to do it. I don't know everything. People in the organization don't know everything. Clinton talked about a culture earlier, and it's going to be the same thing. Educate, educate, educate. That's the day in and day out game I think we all play in technology. Why can we use this? Why can't we use this? Why do we need to go to serverless? Why does this API need changed? And then you get the age-old question also, why is this going to take an 8-point card to try to deliver it? It's education around all of it. So,
well, I think that it goes back to, Parker, what we were talking about earlier about the cultural stuff and the education. I think we need to call that out, though, in the regards of like, we're talking about that steering committee and what they should be doing, and should it be driven down from a top down, or should it be a grassroots effort? I think that's where I was going, and that was kind of one of the reasons I said both, because it's like C-levels and executives need to be educating themselves, because you can have these guys come in and do these demos where they build a whole app right in front of you and woo, it's nice, but is that enterprise ready? No. Is there going to be security holes in it? Yeah. And you have to kind of temper that expectation of like, what is good for us? Okay, cool. I get it. We know that this can do it. You can go out there and, create whatever in just a couple minutes. However, when you start to try to put that into an enterprise solution, that becomes a whole different ballgame. And there's a whole different level of parameters and risks that you have to undertake. And that's why I love it for POCs. It helps you vet out things that you're trying to figure out. But that's where that education needs to happen up at the top, and it needs to happen at the bottom, because I feel like there's a lot of fear that happens with especially people getting into this space, that they don't understand things. And they're like, when people don't understand something, they get scared of it. And so there's education on both sides that constantly has, and it's going to have to constantly change because it's so rapid right now. And frankly, there's not enough people to educate people out there on it, because it is changing. We're all just consumers of this, and we're all just winging it at the end of the day, because this is something we all have never experienced before.
Just AI or just everything in technology? We're just winging it.
Let's just do all of it.
Okay.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
They had this happened at a smaller scale, and they created a whole entire platform, industry segment called CASB, right? It's almost like they need to have a CASB for AI that's AI specific, because your daddy's CASB is not going to work in AI in this day and age, right? So it's like that's the next $1 billion business right there.
I think that goes back to metrics. Again, observability becomes an AI ops, and what we've been talking about, it all stacks on top of AI ops and the observability of those things, because guess what? No human can go through all those logs. You need to have some kind of technology or intelligence looking at those correlations. But the question that you have to kind of change for yourself is, am I observing the right things as an organization? So many of us are still doing things in a legacy format in my mind of, you're getting up, down, is the website certificate open? That's not metrics. That's just operations. And that's a very legacy way of doing it. Is the application doing what I'm expecting it to in a certain amount of time? We've seen these solutions out there, but we're starting to see where now you can start doing those cross correlations in that data. And it's just, I see AI ops really becoming a big win for a lot.
I'd go one step deeper, I think, on that AI ops conversation from a logging perspective. The biggest thing of some of the projects I've worked on in this space is, if I get sued because malpractice, because of an illegal trade, because of something, how do I trace it back to the choices that it made? That's the big grounding that I come to with logging. Cool. I can tell you, the app service was up. I can tell you the Lambda was running. I can tell you all of these things are ongoing. But how do I tell you the decision tree and the decision path that it took down through AI? How do I see the prompt? How do I see the reasoning? How do I know it handed it off agent to agent? How do I know all of these things happened? I need to be able to produce that and say, this is the reasoning behind what happened, Mr. or Mrs. Client. Here's what actually went on. Here's the reasoning why we ended up where we did. I think that's going to be a big other aspect a lot of folks still need to learn is, how do we get that detailed traceability through the conversation and back out to the delivery? How deep does it go? What data files did I pull in? If you're sending it into a search index, how do I go back and understand which files are referenced as part of my story? Maybe it's a vector database that you're also needing to dig into. How do I know what's going on within that aspect to pull files back for me to know that I made the right choice? Yes, I can tell the agent responded, but it gets back to the whole accuracy versus precision terminology of which one do you want to be clustered and wrong, or do you want to be right on the target and very precise in what you're choosing to do? That's just a whole another thing you can go down from a logging and maintenance and monitoring standpoint as well.
Yeah, we're going to be diving into the hackathon phase of my Linux course this upcoming Sunday. And one of the things we're talking about is logging, and this applies to that. So we're going to do a pretty good segment on signal to noise ratio, right? Yep. So on a Linux instance,
I love it.
Log, you have to figure out what is just system noise versus something you really need to look at. The problem with AI is it does it at scale, right? So you've got a lot more data to go through. But in the old habit of how I did it whenever I was setting up and engineering and Linux and Unix and things like that, and even applications that I did in the past, you start by knowing what the known knowns are and you filter those out, right? I don't need to see a TTL on a Oracle connection listener connecting to another. That we know that's just going to happen. I need to see when that drops. That's all, right? So it's kind of that same situation. You have the noise is all the stuff that is your day-to-day process, right? But you need to look and see, archiving when someone generates a prompt, what that prompt does. That's the type of stuff that you need to filter down and observe. Problem is, you've got petabytes and petabytes of data that just is normal infrastructure flowing through all this. Where do you find that needle in the haystack?
But I think to go with that though, it's don't always be fearful to log everything to the same spot. You can have multiple sets of logs. Logging disk space is cheap. Storage is cheap these days.
Yep.
Log out the absolutely highly critical things to different systems that are going to make you can set up multiple loggers, multiple endpoints. You can do whatever is needed to be successful. Yeah. Going through that motion. And it is like, okay, we're going to carve out this style of conversation over here because we potentially flagged it for a fraudulent activity. Let's carve it out and put it in a different storage location that we know directly to go to, that we're getting different alerts on than just the mass of humanity that you're kind of calling out there, like the heartbeat style of logs that no one needs to know about, but nice to have if things actually go sideways someday. But let's put and kind of cordon off the most important aspects from that maybe prompt to go and be successful around finding, resolving, and maybe just better understanding what was said and why.
That signal to noise ratio. That's it. Right?
Yep.
So, gentlemen, I want to dive into the creative world. All right. So we're seeing AI, right? And I'm a part of this as well because I'm a songwriter at heart. But we're seeing AI write, produce, and even perform music. So, from an ethical standpoint, right, how do we begin to protect intellectual property when AI can mimic an artist's style with near perfect accuracy, voice, everything, production, everything?
Yeah. So there's going to be some litigation coming out from a federal and state here in Virginia as well in the Commonwealth on that too. You can't just prompt it and say, "Hey, I want to write a book like Tom Clancy that could do something like that." If I do that, then I'm getting sued. There's copyright violation. And if you try to start, like some of the things they're doing right now in some of these LLMs is already putting some guardrails in place, which is good, right? So if you go to ChatGPT, you say that, it's going to say, "No, we can't do that. Sorry, buddy." Stuff like that, right? So, really, I think we have to plan as consumers to understand that we have to have that responsibility, that responsible use and that ethical use to understand that if we break that law, that, it's logged somewhere and it can get us in trouble, right? I have a lot of opinions on ethics. I won't talk about this portion yet. I'll let, Parker and Clinton give their opinion, but I'm kind of excited about this segment.
What happens when it starts generating money though for yourself? Parker, what was that use case we were talking about?
Right?
What was the guy who wrote the music that let the music play with the AI agents that made about $10 million just listening to his own AI generated music on Spotify?
Yeah.
It's an interesting situation, and I'm not much of a general song creative. I'll leave that to everyone else. You, for the love of God, don't want to hear me sing at all. Much more focused around, I think, the ways that I view being creative, though, which is software delivery and software development, at least in my personal life, how I view it is prompts will become IP, regardless of if it's used for music, if it's used for agent creation, if it's used for some business calculation on are we or are we not going to choose to insure this individual, and you're using an agent prompt. That's now becoming your organization's intellectual property. In going through and protecting that as best as possible is no different than going through the creative space. Maybe it's a video game that people are now working to try to build with that, or music. I know Suno is like a big one we talked about the other day of, I'm going to put this prompt in there. You try to type in Kendrick Lamar, it's just not going to produce. It's going to say, hey, we can't do that. Go and change it to something else. You cannot use particular names. But really just being cognizantly aware that a lot of those aspects are owned either by the person, Kendrick Lamar in that situation, or by a business from a prompt standpoint. It's not just a free will to go and continue to use that elsewhere. Much like any R&D work that's done, they put the time, energy, effort, and resources, money in this instance, into building that. It should be owned and protected by that individual or that company, much like the songwriting lyric styles of the people out there that we all listen to. At the same time. So I think it should be a little bit more protected, and maybe it is. The difficulty is going to be, you can say, all right, I'll just use Bad Bunny because he was at the NFL halftime show. I want a Spanish-based music song that's related to X, Y, and Z and sounds like this in the background. Okay, great. I can produce something similar. I'm trained on that. But again, that should be allowed in my opinion because it's generic. Yeah. It's not going to have the expertise and the naming behind it of that individual.
I struggle with it because, when I think about, there is something about the creative spirit that's very alluring, especially to me, who is not very creative. I'm very process, kind of driven in that way. And unfortunately, I was not smacked with the creative stick in any way, shape, or form. But, when I think about that, and I think about how people come up with a creative formatting of whatever they're trying to stylize, it's the influence of what they're going through in those personal experiences. And I think it's great. It's nice for me to be able to get some kind of stuff out of those solutions, like an LLM solution, when, maybe I haven't been able to do those things in the past, and maybe it helps me rewrite things. I know I take a lot of things and then kind of stylize it to still my own voice in those things. But Broadus, I'm very curious, because you being in the music industry, having done your own stuff, what is your take? And like, how does it make you feel like, you throw stuff in there and
so
we're coming out with maybe pretty decent stuff at some point?
So I've created an album with Sono and prompt production and prompt, I have my lyrics. And the crazy thing about it is I can get around it and make it sound like anyone I want it to sound like. Right. So like I have a song and that's the way I trick people, right? Because like if someone knows me and don't know that I songwrite and I say, hey, you want to listen to the records I wrote or something, just try to get people to get feedback and they'll say no, right? Nah, I'm good, because they think you're whack, right? But I can literally play this song and be like, hey man, check out the Weeknd new song. And they'd be like, oh, this joint fire. I did it. You see what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah.
It's because
do you feel like you're cheating though at that point? Like, I mean, like,
no, well, I'm cheating to the point where
I don't know if
I'm
we're
trying
cheating,
to get feedback, right? But if I'm putting it out as making money, yeah, that's definitely, because you're using likeness, right? But as far as a workflow, I mean, you're talking about, think about even 30 years ago, how long it would take someone to put out an album, right? And let's say 10 songs, if someone was in the studio every day, it could take them 10 days, right? 10 songs could take you 2 days now or a day, right? With mixing, mastering correct, the right prompts, creating everything.
The market is just unreal now. Yeah.
So think about a person who is a songwriter, and let's say they can't sing, and they just have hit records in their head all day, and they cannot sing a lick. Now they can create reference records to send to any artist, and you can make it sound like the artist, so the artist can actually see themselves singing it.
One that they just had a voice that they created, then they just put it on YouTube and then made money off of it that way instead of having to go to somebody else.
Because that's a different business, right? So like the music industry is a business. So for me to put myself out there as an artist, I have to have a strategy as an artist, right? I have to put money behind my content. It's harder these days to make people consume your content without knowing you, the person. Right? Daft Punk was like the last people that really did it with helmets and nobody knew who they were, right? Those days are over because people are just consuming your content and buying records because of you, and the music just so happens to be hot. So if I can create a record and send it to Chris Brown and it sounds like Chris Brown and it sounds like a record he was singing and I wrote it, that is solving a problem for Chris Brown quicker than I could have solved it for him 10 years ago. Right. So that's like speaking a tech company's language and solving their problem when they got a job description open. Right. So it really muddies the line where not even from a artist standpoint, but from a production standpoint, because I'm so into music. Like when I hear kicks, I hear instruments, I'm like, that's a Timberland kick. Okay. Yeah. That's a Pharrell Williams, sax or chord, etc. That's something he would do. So you start hearing even producer sounds and having your song sound like this person produced it. You see? So whatever they doing, it's going to be hard for them.
I gotta say, after what Dave Grohl said to Pharrell Williams this last week about the drum line on "Smells Like Teen Spirit," he literally admitted that was the worst drum line ever because he stole it from Gap Band.
I was just going to bring up not only that, but how many lawsuits have you seen in the last 10 years of like that track was the background music on that one was the same as this other one, and people just let it go. But then I think the whole story around this is pre-AI, and it's one of my favorite things to do is go find a good cover band. What's the difference there? I mean, we have groups running around. I know we have some up in the city here of like, instead of Taylor Swift, it's Sailor Twift. And that's just how they go and sing the music the whole time. Like
I'm a huge Sade fan, and I went to see if like Sade ever going to perform again. And they said she's performing in somewhere in Kentucky, and I'm like, where? And then it said get tickets. You clicked on it, and it was like an evening with Sade, the group, the band, and it was this girl and her band singing cover. So I'm like, man, I would have bought these tickets.
But what's different than that than using either someone's lyrics which is
Right.
literally a cover band.
Yeah.
Or somebody, and you're not, I mean, they're profiting off of it. I'm paying a ticket, or I'm having dinner, or I'm going to see them.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of one of those things. I think music and arts as a whole is an industry where it is very much of, I want to borrow from the best. I don't want to say steal, but I'm going to borrow from the best to try to be successful. Painting is one where, I mean, everyone tries to reimagine Banksy art, right? Sells for tons of money. They try to reimagine that guerrilla street kind of style, all the way down through music, where they do, to Joe, to your point, like, oh, we borrowed this beat from over here. We sang a little bit different. We sped it up. We slowed it down. It's all the same. And I think art is one, in general, the arts as a whole in general are one that are going to struggle with this. I mean, movie production can't be made the same way. I saw a whole interview with Matt Damon around how they can't make movies the same way they used to due to streaming and the ways that things are getting kind of pulled from there. This is an area I think that can give us really cool music production, After Effects and video, new ways to think about paintings and art, but it's going to be very difficult to try to find a solution from an ethics standpoint around what that capability is.
The problem's scale. That's the other issue, like exposure, right? So, Parker, to your point, a cover band gets a niche market with a handful of people that come. They sometimes generate a following that follows them. Shout out to a friend of mine I went to high school with who did the Bandcamp Rejects. I think that's what he went out of Boston. They've got a pretty large following now, right? But honestly, the issue where it's going to become a legal problem is if you create. I mean, we live in an era now where someone can go viral off of saying something as stupid as 6'7", and now millions of kids are doing it, right? Or the brain rot phenomenon that I've had to live through for the last 3 years with my children doing it. And you have a handful, 4 influencers that are making millions of dollars off of this now, right? So take that now to the point to where you generate an AI-driven cover band, right? That cover band starts getting millions and millions of hits. And now you're making millions of dollars off of it. You're gonna get some phone calls and letters from the legal departments of those bands, right?
You have enough money to at least have a good lawyer.
That's where so that's the problem.
But see, look at like the machine behind it, right? So like, for instance, like a company like Suno, where they assume ownership of, let's say, production that they've created that, let's say you prompt out. But as soon as you can open the studio up, and as soon as I open the studio up and add my own keys or I can hum and beatbox, the production now becomes mine because it's original now, right? Because I added something original. But also look at it from a label standpoint, where the cost of production is probably a 10th or 20th of what they normally would spend on production. And they're able to create faster records, faster, get albums complete quicker. And this is now for music what we call reels for basic content, right? We're putting out so much music now, and companies are just grabbing money from those streams and getting the artist hotter, quicker. So when you have giants like that are making shit tons of money, right? How do you now create guardrails around it to say, hey, the very industry that empowers me to make money, I need to, because they're going to Washington. You're not going to Washington. They're going to Washington, putting the money in the hand of Congress. So how do we beat that? Because I don't see this going away at all.
That's good. Hey, just a sidebar. Could you imagine Dr. Demento being in this era with the age of all the weird music that's coming out? How much fun he'd be having? I bet none of y'all know who he was.
I know.
He was real big back when I was in high school.
What about the with the weird music? Weird Al Yankovic, right?
He
launched that music as well, right? Like it's a place for that now, though. Think about it. Yeah. Like it's so much content that being consumed. That type of money, music can make millions of dollars. And I could create a whole Weird Al Yankovic album tonight if I felt like it. And I would let you listen to it tomorrow, and you'd be like, "Holy shit!" Like,
I'm gonna pivot the conversation a little bit here on this because let's take that topic of what we're talking about here, and you have people exploiting the system to make capital gains for themselves, and so. Do we anticipate that AI software is going to have to be utilized to kind of keep these unjustifications out there? Or Like, what do we anticipate the industry doing to kind of help mitigate these risks from a perspective of people exploiting the system, like you were talking about earlier, Parker, about them making millions of dollars from this? I mean, when we talk about risk management and what's happening within the organizations around AI and stuff like this, how do we anticipate, what do you think you're going to see, or have you even seen it yet with some of your customers that you've been working with and thought partners that you've had experiences with?
That's a good question. A lot of the stuff that we're doing is so data driven internally. I think that it's really avoiding, a lot of people are still fearful of that, like, let's open it up a wee bit externally to try to drive additional knowledge, additional value, and guardrail ourselves from this potential problem we're talking about. But I also think it goes back to my comment around your prompt is your IP, like protect that, like the castle that your organization or enterprise may be. I think though, going in towards that protection is kind of wrapping everything we've talked about today. If you actually think about it, it's the foundation. Hey, let's not have, sexual harassment things coming back. Let's not have, images being generated that aren't appropriate, that are going to tarnish a name. Let's not go through and have these issues, profanity as one, setting up those guardrails and security foundation layers, going through, treating our data properly, getting the culture ready to go. I think it's kind of all encompassing of, we don't want to set ourselves up to have a potential problem or be used for much larger things. I think a lot of organizations are also kind of opening their eyes and saying, I'm going to maybe trust a third-party coding agent to go and do software delivery. Maybe I don't want to trust that black box model that I'm going to send it out into as much as I probably should. Maybe I need to look internally and say, all right, we have the expertise. Do we need to build something that's going to go and take care of this for us with much more enriched data? And I know everything that's happening with that model once it leaves my developer's laptop. It goes somewhere. I now know everything it's choosing to do in a secure environment, whether it's GCP, AWS, Azure, locally, doesn't matter. NPU on your laptop, it doesn't matter. I think those are the conversations that are starting to happen much more. There's that, okay, let me go one step deeper and answer the question of, like, this is what we're choosing to do with data because we trust it much more because our team set it up. We know exactly what's going on. MCP servers is another great example as, hey, this is going out there, what's happening, kind of just going off into the ether and coming back with the results set. What happens if that goes down? What happens if I want to enrich the data? I don't have that capability. I'll build my own. So.
Well, the interesting part about all this, right, is AI runs on an operating system, right? I'm bringing this up because to your point, so how do we extrapolate that? Where's the accountability at, right? Back in the early 2000s, the NSA got involved with Linux, security enhanced Linux. They've got hooks into all this stuff, right? So government has capabilities of punching into any Linux instance that's running on System 5 that's after the phase of Ubuntu, for example, right? I'm not saying that the government's peeping on, but they are. Better believe they are in some areas, right? Because they're looking for espionage and stuff like that as well. But the fact is the Linux system has logs, right? And I think the $1 billion deal is having that CASB I talked about before AI, where you can do the central logging, where you can see who's coming in and out of your organization, what prompts. Because Parker, your point, how do I say my prompt is my IP and prove it? You know what I'm saying? And that's how you have that. You have that source of truth. You have that thumbprint, so to speak, that says, well, at this day, Parker Johnson went out and wrote this prompt to do this, to meet this thing, and then Broadus came along and enhanced it and created the greatest cover band of Nirvana in the history of music, right? And then we have proof that you two owned it, right? So, so it's like that's really the answer. That if one of us can figure that out, we'll be generational wealth. But
trillions of dollars, right?
It goes back to the problem, though. Everything's now happening at an enormous scale, right? Yeah. So when you have a problem with the software development lifecycle, for example, it becomes buggy. It's not just that one bug that gets exposed; it's all of them at once, right? It's things like that, right? So you're seeing so many different problems that when you have an issue with IP, you have an issue with security, you have an issue with a prompt that's doing stuff that's unethical. It gets exposed so quick and at scale that you can't control it.
Blast radius, it just becomes massive as the speed of everything.
Yeah.
But does that, like, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, because it's like, how as an organization do we de-risk the application stacks that we're going to be building out there, that somebody could actually be leveraging AI to monetize for themselves? Obviously they need to put some, like, how are you going to red team it almost?
I mean, I think that's like, that goes back to my opinions of, this is going to sound terrible because it's not that long ago, but architecture of yesteryear. Like, how do we protect our APIs properly? How do we put firewalls in front of them? How do we monitor and track? This is the same IP address, just pounding this thing, trying to DDoS it. This is maybe a PIM in front of I need to monitor and understand who's coming in, how they're choosing to come in, where they're coming in from. Why am I going to let someone from maybe a foreign IP address come into a system that's so solely based in the US? All of those architecture choices that I think a lot of people have said, oh, that's already there, can't be forgotten about just because we're building an application with AI. It's all compounding on top of each other. And I know there's a lot of folks trying to get into this field and trying to get into these opportunities. Yes, coding assistants are fantastic. Yes, they're very helpful, but there's still a lot of tribal knowledge. Those jobs aren't going away. That education's not going to change. By taking that time and digging in and being like, what do I need to do to be successful on building an application, getting it prepared to embrace AI, I think is very different than just trying to shove AI into something that already exists, that already has firewalls, gatekeeping in front of it, all the factors that you need of old school architecture, right? It's really not that old school. It's day in and day out things that all of us do. But I think that's the key aspect of what's needed in this instance, is old skills that people have had for years to go and drive success for the adoption of the future.
Yeah, because we've lived through all the other catastrophes that have happened.
But I mean, okay, so obviously this brings up a really great topic. We're not going to be around forever.
Mm-hmm.
And we have people that are coming up through the industry that haven't lived through some of that pain and have some of those scars. And, Joe, I appreciate you going out and teaching people about how to troubleshoot in Linux, because honestly, it's teaching people how to just do certain things like we were talking about the other day and stuff like that. And, knowing what is going on in the system is going to be really integral, because how are we going to have survivability of our roles? When we're seeing that people aren't able to go out and get these kind of just their first experience within the industry, because we're seeing so many of AI take a lot of that away from that, because it's just repetitive work. But those people kind of need those foundational skills, in my mind, because if you don't have that, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit of a left turn here. And what I'm gonna say is like, maybe we are wrong in that we are thinking of things in a very traditional format, and we need somebody to think about it in a new format. So is it that we need to be mentoring, or what, or is it that maybe they bring a whole way of doing it?
So I was in 2015. I was in Austin at the Xenos World, and they had a special guest speaker, Michio Kaku. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's a theoretical physicist. He mentioned that we're reaching an age to where we're going to have a hall of history of being able to have our personality in the internet. And he touched on AI at the time, but he said, just think about this, like and he brought up the movie The Time Machine that came out in the early 2000s, whenever he was there, and you had the library, which was a holographic dude that had access to all the knowledge of the world, right? And I remember thinking to myself, man, how is that going to even be possible? 10 years later, I see it now, right? And what it is to your point, Clinton, is I can take 30 years of knowledge and I can write, a 7-paragraph agent that can basically build an instructor that now has access to the entire world. And I can say to that, you are a Linux expert with three decades of expertise. You've done blah, blah, blah. This turns into 7 or 8 paragraphs of a prompt. And then I codify that and turn it into an agent and send it over to my students. And now they have access to me, even though I'm not there. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's where you leverage AI to bring them up. We had a student, she's not giving me permission to say her name, but she leveraged that to find her way into a Linux job.
Mm-hmm.
Not a cloud job, a Linux job. Because she had accelerated so fast in Linux that she now is they've got a new team. There's 5 people there in Broadus. It's not through Level Up. Sorry. But she,
I'm about to say, hold on, I ain't nobody tell me about somebody landing a Linux job.
She landed a Linux job where she went out and she basically joined a fresh team, and she knew more in 16 months. She knew more stuff about Linux than these people that have been doing it for 5 years, because the prompt taught her. It taught her how to write scripts. It taught her how to write. And Dominic, she was a good example of that. Like the way she was learning on writing scripts and building that stuff as well too. She was another one that was really building that velocity. So I think that's our responsibility of imparting knowledge into that. If we're teaching people or mentoring, we can leverage AI to help them, and then we can continue down our paths. Because I'm planning on retiring in 8 years. To be honest with you, I don't want to be working when I'm 70. But yeah.
So
I relate a lot of that story back. My career took, oh boy, I barely graduated college. I graduated the 2-1. I was on the wrong dean's list 3 times. And it was one of those trying to get any job. I think this was back 2012, 2013. Trying to get any job at that point was difficult. We need a 3.5. We need these other things. I had none of them, right? Getting any opportunity or a foot in the door, regardless of if it's doing QA work, regardless of if it's doing work that maybe you don't think you want to be doing long-term, getting into an organization, busting your ass and trying to find the opportunities that no one else wants to do. To your point there, Joe, will teach you that 33 years of experience. I learned more in 6 months of work by doing exactly that than I think I probably had learned in the 2 years I had a CS. I changed majors after my sophomore year. So 2 years of CS degree to try to get out of there on time. But I've learned more in 6 months than I did in those 2 years of trying to get a CS degree, because I was willing to take any job. I learned how to quickly go and approach a senior leader and tell them the situation in normal terms, because I was like, all right, I only have one shot at this. I can't go in there and be super technical. I have to try to meet them where they are, but bridge that gap between I'm going to go figure it out day in and day out and come in the morning with an answer, to go and tell them, like, look, here's what it looks like and here's how it's choosing to work. And learning it well enough to explain it was, I think, one of my superpowers in that 15 years of a career that I've had so far, going from I don't know what I'm doing, I'm terrible at test taking, I'm not a good student, does not necessarily always equal you are not a good employee or you have a good opportunity. And I want that to be something that everyone takes away at the end of the day. Is just because your grades don't reflect what you feel is appropriate for your expertise, go and fight and show somebody else that you're able to do it. I mean, I know, Clinton, you and I have had a lot of conversations around it. Like, I just in a conversation with Judson Althoff on one-on-one with him, like my career went from 2-1 to talking with Judson. It's like a crazy situation there in between in 15 years. And it's taking those jobs and taking those initiatives that give you the opportunity to learn, never stop learning. I also think one personal thing of mine is don't be the smartest person in the room. I want to learn from everybody I have today. I will continue to do that. And I think that's, once you feel that way, it's maybe an idealistic opportunity to go and look at another opportunity of saying, hey, I'm the smartest one in here. I want to continue to learn the environment of software, 33 years of Linux experience, cloud economy knowledge, how to break it all down is definitely very important. And it's something that I think is lost on folks, because it is, I just want to go work a 9 to 5, especially in consulting. I don't think that happens in the early phases of your career either, but it does pay off in the long run of giving you an opportunity to go and be much more approachable for the next thing. So that's just my quick, like, how do you replace all these people, or are they going to get replaced with AI? I don't think so, because there's so much value that all of us bring day in and day out that's not tangible currently. Again, they're going to say currently today, as of February 2026, that cannot be replaced by a human. We all have skills, we all have desires, we know how to bridge that gap to go and be successful. And that's not something AI can afford anyone.
Yeah. And for the folks trying to get into the game, like we're at a point right now where it's a great equalizer, right? AI is new for everybody. So you're dipping your toe, and you may not have the legacy experience, but you can learn it quickly, right? Mm-hmm. And Parker, I followed the same trajectory, right? I came in, I won't dive too far into it, but I took a chance. I was working imaging laptops at WorldCom, and I took a chance to tell a guy, hey, I know Linux. He ended up hiring me, and that's what kicked off my career. And then to your point, I've left companies because I wasn't the smartest guy in the room. I needed to grow. I needed to get challenged, things like that. You know what I'm saying? And I can't emphasize how important that is to continue to learn. I've been doing this next April will be 30 years, and I'm still trying to figure out how to learn new stuff. I'm still looking at how I can develop, more skills, things like that as well too. And it's just that if you're getting into IT, you have to love it, because if you're doing it just for the money, you're going to hate it. Especially when when you get on call rotations that go 36 hours and you get no sleep, you're going to really hate it. But I love it because it's always been that way. So it's always learning. And,
that 36 hours is terrible, but you learn day in and day out, and you're like, okay, I learned something new. I think the other side of it that goes with that is continue to push. I think spend the time early on. I said this earlier in your career, spend the time, but also take the chances. Joe, you kind of called that out of, I kind of went and found this person who's imaging laptops. I had a similar story. I was working for that first job out of college. I got a phone call. Hey, come work at this startup. Great. What am I going to lose? I'm going into it with what I have. I'm going to come out of it with what I have, plus knowledge or something more if it does work. Newsflash, didn't work. That's why I'm still here. But at the end of the day, I learned a lot. I love working with people. I love pushing the envelope. I love being outside and on the forefront of a lot of technologies. That's not something I would have learned if I would have stayed at that first job. So take risks, take opportunities, especially early in your career. Now, again, I understand with that, I was not with a family at the time. I didn't have all of these things. So I had that flexibility to go do it. So everyone's choices are a little bit different. Yeah. But that can be said any large organization as well. Take the risk, go and try to get in front of people, network extremely hard. That's something that I think a lot of people, I wrote it off early in my career. I don't need to know people. I don't need to be able to do this.
Got to get in the room.
Yeah, the doors that it opens and the capabilities of which it's afforded me in the last 5 years have been absolutely phenomenal. And I would kind of push. I know a lot of you have seen some of the growth and some of the things I've gotten to do in the opportunities that have been afforded too, because you're going in and networking and saying, hey, let me try to work with you, not for you, or like whatever, let's work together to be successful, has been probably one of the other things that I've learned and taken away most in the tech industry as a whole. I think it applies across life, but tech as a whole is ego check at the door and be there to show up in a partnership, I think is the nice thing with the tech community.
I'll take that one away.
I had a funny conversation with someone who got in like 10 years ago on this, and he brought up something that I never heard of, and I want to kind of talk about like the learning process and how AI shapes it. Right? He was telling me they used to have a process that was called the rubber duck debug process. Have you ever heard that? You speak out your code like it's a bottle of water, right? He said, "Now think about this." And I'll give credit to who it was. It's Jesse Leonard. He says to me, "Now imagine this, Joe. You're looking at that rubber duck and it can answer back." And it's like, I already knew it did it. I didn't think of it that way, right? So like, if you talk about value add for your developers, for example, Broadus, you get writer's block whenever you're writing music, right? Absolutely. You can rubber duck the same thing, and it's like, hey, I got to write it, and it answers back. That's where AI can come into play, right? So if you're learning on that, like if you're getting into the game, and especially if you got someone who's got a full stack developer background, who already understands that, man, you can turn that into a really good tool to help you accelerate, right? And it's just there's so many ways you can do this. But anyways, I'm sorry, Clinton, I keep talking over you.
No, we're good. So
yeah. So if that's all, that brings it into our time. We've been talking about a lot, everything from risk to talent to ethics to music, and I hope everyone that joined us has really gotten some great gems out of this. Parker, Joe, Clinton, Parker, for you, thank you so much for joining us. It's hugely
anytime. Happy to join. I love supporting the next generation. I think it's a massive opportunity of untapped potential, and I don't want to say generation of just age-wise. I think just next generation of developer. There's a lot that goes into it. A lot of people find it later in life and do a fantastic job. I love supporting them. Not something I had early in my career. So happy to be here. Happy to give that opportunity back to them. And also just encourage everyone, continue to push, continue to use the tools that you have, but also think smartly about leveraging them. Don't just blindly trust. I think brought us to your point there, or maybe it was Joe. Go and read why it's telling you it's going to implement something. Don't just take it at face value. Do the educational aspect of the AI powered tool. Please read as to why it's making the suggestion, and don't just blindly click accept. And you will be surprised of the places you will go in it with AI as well as in your career if you're able to do that. So really appreciate the time. Clinton, Joe, Broadus, look forward to it.
So we got something excited. We got Phil Maroney going to be on our next one in March. So we're going to be talking about security and AI. in security and cloud NAS specifically. So Parker would love to have you on that one as well too. He's a thought leader on that side too. So really excited about having that team. So next up is security.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you to all the audience on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Parker, Joe, or Clinton. But that's all for now. Thank you all for joining us, and let's continue to level up for 2026 and use AI every single day and learn. All right. So thank y'all once again, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me once again. Thank y'all for your leadership. Thank you for the gems that you drop. All right. See y'all later.